Pull a carrot out of the ground. Snap a twig off a tree. Mow your lawn on a Sunday afternoon. You don't think twice about it. Plants are just things. They sit there. They don't run. They don't scream. They don't bleed. But in the last 30 years, scientists have discovered something that should make you put down your pruning shears. Plants know when they're being eaten alive. They send distress signals to their neighbors. They summon predators to fight their battles for them. And when they're injured, their entire body responds in under 2 minutes. They just do it in a language we spent centuries completely failing to notice. Researchers at the University of Missouri set up cameras and microphones around caterpillar-damaged plants. Then they played recordings of caterpillars chewing. Just the sound, no actual insects. The plants responded. They started producing mustard oils, the same chemical defense they use when they're actually under attack. They couldn't see the caterpillar. They couldn't feel it. They heard something that sounded like danger and they reacted. A plant heard a threat and changed its biology because of it. Now, mainstream science will tell you this isn't feeling anything. It's just chemistry. Stimulus and response. No different from iron rusting when it gets wet. But here's where it gets complicated. In 2019, a team at the University of Wisconsin did something no one had managed before. They genetically modified plants to produce a fluorescent protein that glows when calcium moves through cells. Calcium signaling is how animal nervous systems transmit information. It's the electrical current your neurons ride when you touch a hot stove. Then they damaged a leaf. What happened next lit up the screen like a lightning storm. Within 90 seconds, a calcium wave shot from the damaged leaf through the entire plant. Stem, roots, every other leaf, all of it flooded with the signal. The undamaged leaves started producing defense chemicals before anything had even touched them. The plant wasn't reacting to pain. It was warning itself. The whole organism went on alert because one part of it got hurt. That's not rust. That's something else. Here's what makes this really hard to dismiss. When you get injured, your body releases a compound called glutamate. It's a neurotransmitter. It carries the pain signal from wherever you're hurt up to your brain. That's the biology of feeling something. Plants don't have brains. They don't have neurons. But they use glutamate too. The exact same compound. When a leaf gets damaged, glutamate triggers the calcium wave. Remove the glutamate receptors and the wave stops. The rest of the plant gets no warning at all. The molecular machinery plants use to transmit injury signals is startlingly similar to the machinery animals use to feel pain. Which raises an uncomfortable question. If the same chemical does the same job, send an urgent signal across an organism the moment it gets damaged, at what point does the word pain start to apply? There's a botanist named Monica Gagliano who has spent her career trying to answer that question, and the scientific community has spent a good chunk of time trying to discredit her for it. Her most famous experiment used a plant called Mimosa pudica. If you've never seen one, it's remarkable on its own. Touch it and the leaves fold shut instantly. It looks almost theatrical, like a plant flinching. Gagliano set up a device to drop mimosa plants from a small height. Not high enough to damage them, but enough to trigger the folding response every time. She dropped them repeatedly, dozens of times. The plants stopped folding. They habituated to the drop. They learned it wasn't a real threat and they stopped responding to it. When she shook them instead, a different stimulus, they folded immediately. They hadn't just gotten tired. They had specifically recognized that the drop was harmless and adjusted. Habituation is considered one of the most basic forms of learning in neuroscience. It requires memory, the ability to store a past experience and use it to change future behavior. A plant with no brain remembered something. When Gagliano published this, the response from parts of the scientific community was not particularly kind. Some dismissed it as a mechanical explanation. Repeated dropping had changed the plant's physical structure, not its mind. The skeptics may well be right, but Gagliano went further. She ran mazes, actual mazes, with pea plants. She trained them to associate light coming from a specific direction with a fan blowing air. After a few days of pairing, she turned off the light. The plants grew toward where the light used to come from, anticipating it based on the fan alone. Conditioned response. In a plant, with no nervous system. So what's actually happening inside a plant when you cut it? When a plant is damaged, it releases a compound called jasmonic acid. This triggers a cascade of chemical reactions throughout the whole plant. It switches genes on and off. It produces toxins. It thickens cell walls. It redirects resources away from growth and toward defense. Some plants do something even stranger. They release volatile chemicals into the air, essentially airborne chemical messages. that neighboring plants of the same species can detect and respond to. Trees in a forest under insect attack have been found to chemically warn trees dozens of meters away, trees with no physical connection to them at all. They talk to each other, through the air and underground, through fungal networks threading through the soil. Some researchers call it the wood wide web. A forest isn't a collection of individual trees competing for sunlight. It's something closer to a network, and when part of the network gets hurt, the rest of it finds out. Now, does any of this mean plants feel pain the way you feel pain? Almost certainly not. Pain, in the way we understand it, involves more than just a damage signal. It involves suffering, a conscious experience of something being wrong. And for that, every piece of evidence we have points toward needing a brain, or something functionally similar to one. Plants don't have that. When a caterpillar chews through a leaf, there's no plant somewhere in there wishing it would stop. There's no experience of anything. There's chemistry. Extraordinary, sophisticated, staggeringly complex chemistry. But chemistry. The problem is that explanation starts to feel a little convenient the deeper you go, because we also said insects couldn't feel pain. Then we looked closer and found they have nociceptors, the same sensory cells that detect tissue damage in humans. We said fish couldn't feel pain. Then studies found they have the same neural pathways, the same behavioral responses to injury, the same stress hormones. Every time we drew a line and said, this is where feeling stops, we eventually had to redraw it. The definition of pain has been a moving target every time we've actually examined it carefully. Here's the thing that sits at the center of all of this. We've always defined pain in terms of what it looks like. Does it run away? Does it cry out? Does it have a face that can show us it's suffering? Plants fail every one of those tests, so we assumed the answer was obvious. But plants have been solving problems, communicating, remembering, and responding to injury for hundreds of millions of years longer than we have. They've done it with a completely different architecture. No neurons, no brain, no centralized command center, just cells, chemicals, and signals. And it has worked, for longer than we can really imagine. While animals were still figuring out how to grow legs, plants had already spent millions of years learning how to survive, communicate, and defend themselves without moving an inch. We built our understanding of intelligence around a brain, around movement, around a face. And then we looked at everything else in the world and said, if it doesn't do it our way, it doesn't count. The question isn't really whether plants feel pain the way you do. The question is whether we've been arrogant enough to assume that our version of feeling, the screaming, bleeding, flinching kind, is the only version that counts. We've built entire systems of ethics around the idea that something has to show us it's hurting before we take it seriously. But the plant doesn't know it's supposed to perform for us. It just does what it has always done. In the dark, in the soil, in a language we are only just beginning to learn how to read. And perhaps we will never truly understand that language completely.